Welcome to the Hypervoice. I'm your host, Stephen Morioka, and today I am joined by Alex Underhill.
Alola, Stephen.
Alola. And we have another guest with us today, Diana Bros.
Thank you guys for having me.
So Diana just came off a regional win back in the spring at the Madison Regional in the 2016 format. And I guess before we head into some 2017 stuff, we have Fort Wayne that just happened a few weeks ago, maybe last weekend, whatever point it is now. But let's quickly, before we jump into all this good stuff on the new format, let's talk about Fort Wayne really quickly and say goodbye to the old format. Both of you were at that regional. Tell us a little bit about it. Who won? What happened to you guys?
Well, Dane ended up taking it all. Dane Zeman, who is a Illinois player who comes to all of our PCs, who's actually had him on the show before, so very cool to see that. I'm friends with him, and I actually I played him in Swiss, and it did not go well. It did not go well at all. It was a quick 2-0, like probably the first match done that round. And yeah, as for myself, I made it to 4-2, and then the last round, I thought I had it all sealed up. My Xerneas was boosted up, and then I got critical hit, and so that just took it away from me, but it's alright. I mean, I was only going to get some CP. I can just get it at other events, make it up later.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I know I was tracking it through Twitter, so I know that Dane ended up taking the whole thing with a pretty interesting X-ray team, I think, something very similar that he brought to Worlds, so that was cool to see that, you know, there's still different things going on, even post-Worlds for 16. I decided to give Double Primal one last ride. I'm sure everyone's very surprised by that. It didn't go too well. It was a combination of not playing as well as I could have and my Groudon needing glasses on the day. But, you know, overall still a very fun event.
Yeah, those poor Groudon accuracy issues, you know, hopefully they don't end up being another thing for this coming year. But I guess that's it for Fort Wayne. We had Dane defeat Justin Kribaugh in the finals there. You know, good top cut coming up from that regional. Congrats to Dane for winning, to everyone who placed well, picked up some points. You know, great for all of them. Hopefully you guys are excited for the next big tournament you go to. And speaking of big tournaments, we have London coming up this week. Or this weekend, rather. And it's going to be a big one.
Yeah, it's serious crunch time for people going to the event. They need to get everything ready in game and make sure that they have the right medical.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's probably the most important tournament in Europe, and it's a couple weeks after the release of the game. So I feel it's gonna be one of two things. It's gonna be a lot of people playing it very safe, very standard, just to try and get points, considering the importance, or you're gonna see someone come up with something really unexpected that nobody's gonna be prepared for, sweep the whole thing. So I'm actually really excited for the stream coming up to be able to watch that.
Yes, and speaking of streams, which is a perfect segue to the stream team who's going to be, you know, commentating for us in Europe. We have three returning commentators, not players rather, but they're also players. We have Jay Blake, who did Worlds for us, Matt Durrell, and Nemanja Sandic, also goes by Parangon. Those three have all commentated before. You know, they've had experience. They're going to do a great job. We also have two newcomers, I believe, in Kay Dyson and Sebastian Ernst. So, pretty good stream team there, you know, wishing them the best of luck in, you know, doing their job. So, they provide the best show for the viewers.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I know a lot of these guys have put in a lot of work. Jay Blake, particularly Matt Dorrell, has put in a lot of work for the community. I know he spent last season roving, you know, with his stream to try and get as many events streamed as possible. So I really appreciate all the work these guys put in to be able to give us a stream and to be able to give us this material to work with, basically, as other players here across the pond.
Yeah, I was actually talking to Steven about how excited I was to be able to watch this stream, and he had to break the news to me that it's probably starting at around like 2 a.m. For time, the time for us, and so I was like, I don't know if that'll work out so well. Like, and we'll actually be all at a Premier Challenge. I believe all three of us will probably be there because we have a Premier Challenge going on the day of the London International. So hopefully we can all come together and maybe watch a bit of it between rounds and stuff like that. I'm really looking forward to this stream.
Yeah, definitely.
We'll have a lot of interesting things coming out of there just because it's so early in this new metagame, maybe 3-4 weeks right after the games come out. And it's crazy to think we may have Pokemon standard teams coming up and coming out of it already. And maybe we'll see something really creative that starts to shape and mold the metagame out of this huge first major event. And I guess before we get to talking about some metagame stuff, we'll just go over something that came out in the official rules document, and that is the new overall timer that we're getting. So instead of having battle time for each game, like we used to have in previous seasons, we have already talked about how you have your time of 10 minutes per game in your matches, and there's an external overall clock of 50 minutes for the entire best of 3. So what do you guys think of that?
Well, it's definitely interesting. It makes me think of TCG immediately because they do have those overall round timers. Although, from what I'm hearing, the information of like how long the round has been going is not public. And so that's actually a really interesting factor, because if players did know how much time remained in the round, they might choose to play slow through game 2 or something like that to force a sudden death or something like that, which is something else we need to discuss.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a really strange choice. I think it's going to change team building a little bit. It's going to definitely change how you play. It's strange that now you have to compensate for adjusting in a best of 3, gathering information for that, and then you also have to have a game plan for a potential sudden death if it does come to that. You have to know, what would I lead in that? How would I play that out, or how would I act in that if it came up? So it's definitely changed a lot of things competitively.
With sudden death especially, it's we've had this in the rules in the past. It's just I've never really seen any game come to it before. Now that it's much more possible to reach this type of event in a game, it seems exciting. Also seems kind of a little scary with how you approach that kind of thing, because I don't think anyone has ever prepared for that type of match before.
Yeah, so I guess just to go over for the people listening, a sudden death, I believe, is when you and your opponent are tied in matches. Like, let's say you had just completed game 2 and you had reached 50 minutes, and you didn't have time to start a game 3. You and your opponent would be tied, and so a sudden death would lead to you both starting up in another match and then selecting your typical 4 Pokemon, but the match is decided by the first person to take a KO. Does that all sound correct?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
In sudden death, I thought it was after they give you 3 turns, and then if someone has a Pokemon lead, then they determine a winner, and if not, they just keep going.
That's if a game is still going on and they are and they reach the 50 minutes. So there's also the 3-turn extension, which is kind of like the 3-turn thing that they have in TCG, and we actually saw this happen on stream where once the 50 minutes mark is reached, a TO or judge will come over to you and tell you, you have reached 50 minutes, this is turn 0. You have 3 more turns to decide the outcome of the match. And so then you play out those remaining 3 turns, and tiebreakers will decide the match, just like we've kind of seen in the past, where number of Pokemon is the first factor, followed by HP percentage throughout the whole, or remaining over, or HP remaining over the HP of the entire team, and then followed by the other factors below that.
Yeah, it seems kind of complicated, I strongly advise everyone to read over the rules document, make sure you understand what's happening there. And I want to get another quick clarification if you guys know this. If you're in, so that would happen in effect, say, in game 2, if someone's up 1-0, and then what happens if time runs out in game 2? Is that what happens, the 3-turn thing?
So if you reach 50 minutes in the middle of game 2, that's when they will come over and say, do your 3 remaining turns. And then let's say that the person who won game 1 loses through those 3 turns. Then you would reach a tie between the 2 players. And so that is when you force sudden death, which is where you start another game, send out your 4 Pokemon each, and the first person to take a KO wins the match.
I see. So game 3 would act as sudden death rather than just giving the tie to both players.
Yes, I believe that's exactly how it's going to be playing out. But like Steven said, to make sure that you understand everything, read over the rules, read them carefully, and try to understand what could happen at any of these events, especially because we've seen already matches can take longer in this format because certain Pokemon might be able to stall each other out indefinitely.
And if you still don't understand, all the match stuff, just don't play Celesteela, and then you won't ever get to the sudden death part, and you'll be fine.
See, that's what I thought originally from the start. I was like, all right, well, this isn't too much of an issue if you're not using Celesteela, or if you are. However, I've seen it happen with like Melodic versus Gastrodon, or Melodic versus Melodic. There's a lot of Pokemon that can kind of just continue to keep healing. I imagine the same thing would happen if it was Porygon versus Porygon. And yeah, so it's something that's going to be happening regardless of the Pokemon you choose. I guess there are certain Pokemon that you can choose. It's just that there are a lot of popular Pokemon that can force this kind of thing to happen.
Right, they may force, matches going all the way to that 50-minute mark, but I guess the true purpose of introducing your time, and to make sure you don't want to run out of yours before the actual match time runs out, is that I guess this is really more for viewership and for the people watching the game and streams and stuff, is you all want to keep seeing constant action over the course of a game, and even though you're sitting there watching them heal, it's better than just watching the Pokemon watch each other.
While I admit this is definitely better for a viewer standpoint, I do miss the old timer. I don't think there was a whole lot wrong with it from a competitive standpoint. I felt like it was really fair, and it allowed for certain win conditions over strategies that would normally take way too long to win, such as like Shedinja that you can't hit, stalling out your whole team, or somebody setting up a bunch of minimizes. Those weren't strategies that we had to worry about in the past, because if those strategies normally require going down in Pokemon, you could win on time, or at the very least, if you're going to lose in 15 minutes, not a whole hour.
Yeah, it's definitely a much more dangerous timer, I think, because they give you the 10 minutes of your time, but they also, I believe, extended the turn timer to 90 seconds now, so you could potentially waste a lot of your time by, trying to think through a move, depending on just how complicated a situation you're in a given game.
Did they really extend the turn timer? Because I thought
don't
it
think
went
they
down.
did. I thought it was only 45.
I thought so too.
I believe that's just team preview is 90 seconds.
Is it now? Okay, because I've heard both things. I've heard people saying that they've had 90-second turn timers too, but I could be wrong on that.
It could be something that people see on BattleSpot, or maybe it's different if you're playing a private match with a friend or something. But from reading the rules, I thought it was 45 seconds. And that was actually, this is my memory from when I recently read the rules for this new timer announcement, when they officially released that document a couple of days ago, whenever it was. But alright, it seems like we're kind of wasting time here, talking so much about time. We should probably get moving forward, talking about the more interesting things. People know that VGC 17 is out. They've been playing it. They've been experimenting with it. And so I guess what we could really talk about very quick, because it's basically an endless discussion, is kind of like what's popular, what to expect in London. What is the metagame like right now?
So yeah, Diana, do you want to start us off? You can pretty much start us anywhere. Like, what have you seen be popular? What's threatening? Are there any standouts you can think about? Any underdogs too?
Sure. I think a couple of, right now I've seen 2 kind of standard teams emerge. One is what is already being affectionately referred to as Cella Standard, which is Celesteela, Tapu Koko, Gyarados, Garchomp, and then usually 2 fillers of your choice in there.
Often Marowak.
Yeah, obviously, often Marowak, Porygon in those last two slots. But I've seen Tapu Lele in that slot, in the Porygon slot and other small iterations there. The other one obviously being, the Torkoal, Lilligant, Oranguru team where you try to, spam Eruption basically and 2-hit KO the metagame, if you're allowed to. So those are the two, kind of main teams that have been running around as far as I've seen. But there's a lot of interesting underdogs. We've seen Araquanid come up as like a counter. We've seen Nihilego come up as a counter to, standard, seeing as it outspeeds and does quite a bit of damage to a lot of the teams. Tapu Bulu rain teams have been coming up. So there's actually a lot of really interesting stuff going around, which is really exciting considering how limited your choices were, in last year's metagame in 16.
You mentioned that there's that kind of common core with the Celesteela and all the Pokemon that kind of surround and support it. We did see Chupacross win the New York PC on stream just this weekend, and it's kind of interesting to look at because him and Lorcy both had very similar teams, 5 out of 6 of the same Pokemon on each other's teams, and it made people start to worry, like, is this format getting too standard too quick? But I definitely don't think that it's going to be too much of an issue. People just are kind of grabbing onto things that they've seen be popular and are choosing to just give it a try before other people kind of figure out how to beat it. But eventually, people are going to find ways around these teams. They just have to get creative with it and try things out. There are a whole lot of Pokemon in this format. A lot of Pokemon that got buffed, a lot of Pokemon with new abilities, and lots of things worth trying and experimenting with before you just give up and say this format has become too standardized.
Yeah, I agree. And even within those standard teams, that were playing each other, I noticed in the finals, it was almost like, as much as everyone's probably going to hate this comparison, watching a chalk mirror in 15, it was very dependent on the small differences, like Chuppa having the assault vest on his Garchomp, which gave it so much more bulk, and just other little team differences that gave him a huge advantage, though. So it was still really, really interesting, despite how similar the two teams were.
In terms of other things that I've seen, like, popular, I've only spent about a week playing VGC because I wanted to get at least a bit farther into the game before I spoiled myself as to what the whole Pokedex was. But I've seen nearly all of the Tapus, Tapu Koko probably the most, and then Lele, and then Bulu, and then very rarely do you see Feeny. And a lot of the Ultra Beasts are good, too. A lot of people have gripes about them being legal, and some of the Tapus, too, because, we don't really have any legendaries in this format, so people need something to be upset about. But I don't think they're too much of a worry, because all these Tapus, it creates a lot of cool play with the terrain, something that we haven't had a bunch of experience with in the past generation, even though that's when they were introduced. And the Ultra Beasts, they're all really gimmicky. Like, they all have these, like, crazy high stats in one aspect and then very low in the other one, and such like that. So, like, the only one that's, like, super well-rounded is Celesteela, which we expect to be very popular, but there should be a lot of counterplay to it, because when you have popular Pokemon, you should make sure your team is ready to beat them. However, I don't think anything seems to be too broken in this format so far. And then, lastly, you did mention Torkoal teams were pretty popular, and Rain's kind of on the rise. Weather has definitely seen a bit of a comeback, though maybe not as strong in this format because of the Pokemon paired with them aren't around, like Venusaur or Ludicolo. Instead, we had to use kind of new ones, and Ninetales is also another weather setter that I've been seeing a lot of as a standalone weather setter. The teams typically don't capitalize on the hail as much as they're just capitalizing on using Ninetales and firing off blizzards and setting up Aurora Veil.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's an interesting format in that almost anything can be viable. I mean, I was watching it was the NorCal PC, and actually Gigalith ended up winning that one, so it was a sand team. again, that didn't really abuse the sand, but it was simply a Gigalith with Oranguru to abuse the Instruct in the Trick Room. And that's the team that ended up winning the entire PC. So a lot of different things are definitely playable in this format, and really, really interesting, I think.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned Oranguru with the Trick Room. Trick Room is another thing that is kind of really popular right now, whether you want Trick Room on your team to stop opposing Trick Room or you want to abuse the numerous slow Pokemon that were introduced in Alola. Torkoal and Gigalith are very popular older Pokemon that were kind of buffed this generation that are being abused in Trick Room, but a lot of the new Pokemon have lower base speeds, and so you see things like Drampa and Araquanid and Marowak kind of taking the charge in Trick Room, and it's really cool to see people kind of playing, like so many people playing Trick Room, but also people using mixed teams with Trick Room modes and non-Trick Room modes that I've always been a huge fan of, and I'm glad to see that it's so popular this year.
Right. Stuff like hard Trick Room teams are kind of dangerous to run. If you can get your strategy off effectively, great, then that'll do well. But when you come up against a really good team and a really good player, that's going to be tough to do because they're going to have plans for that kind of strategy. And it just seems like even though the dex is limiting the number of Pokemon we can actually use, it seems like there are a lot of options. Because you talked about earlier how all the Ultra Beasts, with the exception of Celesteela, really have some type of an Achilles heel, where they have, some base stat that's just not great enough and they have problems, or they don't have the best typing, in my opinion. And you've talked about so many different teams already and so many different Pokemon. It seems like there are a lot of options. People are, because London's coming up and people need to be prepared for that major event, they're sticking with that standard, bread and butter staple Pokemon that I need to use to win to pick up points. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of variety coming out of this, and it'll be exciting to see the metagame grow.
Yeah, I agree. It feels almost like the polar opposite of last season of 16, which felt like you can use any Pokemon you want. They basically opened it up to anything, but really only a handful were viable, to where this time they limited it to this very small pool, but almost any Pokemon in that pool is viable, or most of, I would say, are usable in some way on the right team.
Right, and just thinking about the speed tiers of this entire Pokedex, in terms of what's legal, then you guys are right in how there's a lot of slow stuff, and a bunch of the fast Pokemon, there aren't as many as we'd expect, and things are leaning more towards the slower spectrum, which is why Trick Room's really popular. A lot of the Pokemon that are slow are also really powerful as well. And I'm sure we're going to see you're going to be seeing Trick Room throughout the entire season, just like you do in every year. Trick Room's a good move. Use it to your best advantage.
I think it'll be really cool because, unlike the open dex formats, speed control is very limited this year. There aren't as many options as people are used to, not as many Icy Wind users or Tailwind users or even Trick Room users. There's only kind of a handful, and so you gotta have to build your team to be kind of comfortable in any situation or to really capitalize on certain forms of speed control from certain Pokemon, like a Pelipper setting up Tailwind or an Oranguru setting up Trick Room. If you really want to make use of those Trick Room turns or Tailwind turns, you gotta build your team accordingly. And because there's so many Pokemon sitting in the middle speed tiers, you have to either prepare for speed control or use it yourself to your advantage.
Here's a question for you guys. So you've been seeing matches and I'm assuming playing a little bit. Personally, I haven't done either yet. I just haven't caught up to that point yet to start playing. But I wanted to ask you, what are the more popular Z moves you've been seeing?
For me, the number one thing I've seen is, Gyarados holding the water Z move. That one's been very, very popular just because of Gyarados' ability to set up, a Dragon Dance or two if you're up against a more bulkier passive team, and then, basically nuke something with Hydro Vortex, which is the name of the Z move, coming off a boosted attack.
Yeah, besides Gyarados, it's kind of all over the place. I thought about this beforehand, and I was trying to think of what were the most common Z moves that I see, but it's really, there isn't much standardization in it yet. Like, you do see a lot of Gyarados using its Z move, and then occasionally you'll see, like, Arcanine trying to be really fast and blow things up, and then Garchomp with its Tectonic Rage coming off of Earthquake gives it a nice, very strong single target ground move that you can use without your partner having to protect or be in the air to dodge the Earthquake. So it's kind of a neat aspect there. But other than that, I don't see a whole lot of Z move standardization. And it's kind of fun, it can be a bit frustrating at times when, like, turn one, that thing that you did not expect to use a Z move at all just uses a Z move and suddenly you're down a Pokemon. But in best of 3 play, if they do that kind of stuff, you can play around it. And overall, I think it leads to a lot of neat play, kind of giving any Pokemon the ability to surprise and take charge.
Definitely. A couple of the other ones that you should always watch out for, if you see an Eevee on the team. We all know about Eevee-Mancy, right?
Yes.
I've played against a couple of those, and then I actually played a couple Z Destiny Bond Gengars to try and help set up Trick Room that way, because it basically gives you the effect of Follow Me and Destiny Bond in one move, which is something really interesting and something I've wanted to play around with myself. But yeah, those are just kind of the ones I've run into so far.
And lastly, alongside Eevee, we have to mention Porygon Z. Porygon Z you don't really see used too often unless it has its Z move, which is Conversion, and that boosts all of its stats +1, on top of changing its type to the move of its first, changing it to the type of its first move slot. And so you kind of get a free boost in everything, besides accuracy and evasion, and you get to change the type to whatever you want, alongside with Porygon Z having the adaptability ability. It can be very strong and very surprising.
I actually had no idea about this Porygon Z thing. So it's the first move in its move slot. That's what its type changes to.
Yeah, conversion has always worked that way, and so what you typically see, at least from what I've seen most commonly, is a Porygon Z with, like, Blizzard in the first slot, and then it uses Z conversion, which is untauntable. Because Z status moves can't be taunted. And then it sets up this, Z conversion, boosts its attack, special defense, and speed by 1 stage, and changes its type. And so typically it turns into an ice type and goes for Blizzard next to, like, a Ninetales, because adaptability Blizzard at +1 and +1 speed kind of hurts. And it's really cool. And then it runs another coverage move, and you could... the flexibility in it can be really cool because not everyone goes this route and turns into an ice type. Some people turn into a ghost type because dark and ghost moves aren't as common, or some people choose to turn into an electric type because it's only got 1 weakness. And so there are some really cool strategies and people trying to pull it off almost like it's Xerneas from past formats, but it's definitely much less polarizing, and it can still be one-shot even through the boosted defenses because Porygon Z isn't the bulkiest of Pokemon. So it's an interesting, fun strategy that I expect to see a lot of in the beginning, and maybe it'll fall off towards the end, or maybe people will really learn to exploit it. It's a really cool one, though.
And Diana, you mentioned Eevee earlier. I think a lot of people heading into the format in the beginning thought, this is going to be really gimmicky. From what you've seen so far, is it still more of a gimmick, or is it something that people should start looking out for?
Well, I know it is obviously a very, gimmicky team, and I'm not sure it's something that could perform consistently, but it's definitely an interesting option to have as a mode on a team. If you think you can pull off a setup like that, and typically what they'll do is baton pass into something that has considerably better stats than Eevee. If you can pull that off, I know Giovanni Costa played around with baton passing into a Specs Tapu Lele, which he found some success with, as I followed him on Twitter. So it's definitely something to watch out for, but I'm not sure it's something that's going to see a lot of play.
Yeah, it's interesting to note that right now, I believe Eevee's Z move doesn't work correctly on Showdown, so it's kind of hard to judge how popular it is based on the usage on there. However, I do remember that it was reaching pretty high up on the ladder in-game early on in the format. And I don't know if that's the case anymore, if that person's still up there. But it was just interesting to kind of see that it's already having an impact early on, but it might just be because people aren't really ready. And we'll have to see going forward how popular it ends up being.
I love how this format is just so crazy right now, and it seems to be changing rapidly, because you just said, early on in the format, and we are early in the format, and this must be like week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. There's all different things popping up.
Yeah, it kind of changes on I would say like every couple of days, the things kind of rise and fall in popularity. And it's a lot due to people kind of like copying what they see. Like Aaron Zhang had a big impact because he started using the Oren Guru Lilligant Torkoal team and on his YouTube channel, and so that spiked a lot of people using that on like the Showdown ladder and probably in game too. And so you're going to see like a lot of things kind of spike in popularity, and they will be standard just because people are interested in it. But I don't think there's a whole ton of centralization yet, and that's what's really cool is you can see all kinds of different strategies work.
Yeah, I'm kind of happy about that though.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, and one team rising to popularity, instead of taking over, it seems to actually shift the metagame really rapidly, which is really interesting. Like, as soon as Torkoal became popular, I'm not sure where it came from, but somebody came up with this Gold Duck Pelipper Rain team, basically as a direct counter to that, being able to switch in your rain, negating Torkoal's drought. So I'm interested to see what that's going to push to be like the next thing. And as stuff starts to override itself, I think we're going to get a really interesting and very diverse metagame.
And I imagine whatever happens in London is going to have a severe impact worldwide for the metagame, and just depending on what, of course, on what happens there. So lots to be lots to look forward to when we see London and what happens. But for anyone who's going there, if you guys had to pick, kind of just listing off some of the top threats right now, who would players need to be ready for?
Well, just based on seeing them play the format, Chubb Across seemed to be pretty strong with his team that he wanted the PC with. However, it's kind of hard to say because I haven't seen too many players play this format yet. There's a lot of strong players going to London that we haven't even seen anything from them yet, and so we are kind of left in the dark. It's based on what we've seen them do in past formats. There are a lot of strong players that I expect to do well just because they're good at VGC, not because they're good at VGC 2017.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, I'm sure that the big name players going to London are going to turn up with very solid teams, because they understand just the basics of team building. And I'm sure that's going to have a huge effect on the metagame to see what those top guys bring. I'm excited that London is bringing together players from all over the world. I believe even some Japanese players are flying in for that. So that's going to be really exciting to see what they bring and how they influence what goes on at that tournament.
I know that Steven has already mentioned to me a couple of players that he's excited to see in London. Do you want to talk about a couple of them, Steven?
Yes, of course, I'd love to. So we all know there's going to be a huge international scene there, and what's really cool about that is just how, usually with Worlds and things like that, you only get to see this huge melting pot once every year in August, and what these internationals are going to let us do is see this type of interaction 5 times a year rather than once. So this is going to be a really cool experience to watch and see. You think about the top 4 of Worlds we just had in 2016. All 4 of them are going to be in this international, and that's kind of crazy to think that they're all competing in this major tournament just 4 months after Worlds, where usually it'll take a year till you wait for the big event. But here we are in London, and getting back to some of your specific players I want to talk about, I think the biggest one I want to mention here is Ray Rizzo. And he's finally making his return to play, after a few years not playing very seriously and one not just playing much at all, and then taking a year off for commentary, and he was great on that. And, much respect to him. Obviously, 3-time world champion. You can't deny how good he is. And I'm just so excited to see him back in action. I love his play style. I love him as a player. And can't wait to see what he brings. And, if he's going to have an impact, coming off really a long off season for him.
I'm really excited to see reigning world champion Wolf Glick there because while he is definitely one of the most consistent and strongest players, he also is very creative and doesn't actually play standard very often. And especially early on in this format, I don't expect him to be playing much standard at all. I bet he has come up with some really creative strategies to kind of give him an edge over the other players, alongside with playing very well with basically anything you could give him, I imagine.
Yeah, I'm excited to see some of the big, Team North America people coming in. I think Joshua Lorcy has talked to me a little bit about the metagame. I think he's a very strong player going out there, so I'm interested to see how he does and what he brings. Obviously, Ashton Cox and Jamie Boyd. Jamie Boyd being what I like to call the UK version of Ashton Cox. They both just managed to bring the weirdest things and just do so well with it. So they're really exciting players to watch, to find something that maybe you wouldn't think of otherwise. And yeah, I just think that it's going to be a really, really strong tournament overall.
Right. Those two guys are really innovative players, and, very excited to see what they bring to London, how successful they'll be, and, the impacts they'll have for the rest of the season. And speaking of impacts, you have Alex Gomez is also going to be there. He's one of the Travel Award recipients for Europe, and it's not really a surprise because he lives in Europe. He's going to be going to that international anyway. But last season we saw him make a major impact early in the winter when he had a double promo with Bronzong, and then that took shape of the metagame for a pretty long time. And a lot of other people took their turns in the spotlight using it throughout the season, but he's I think the UK National was in London last year as well, so he's really a defending champion heading into this thing.
Yeah, I definitely agree. He's someone to look out for, and obviously he's also somebody I look up to, seeing as, the regional I participated in, I used a very similar team to his. I've always really liked his team building and his play style, so it'll be interesting to see how he moves from being very, very successful in VGC 16 to hopefully being successful in 17 as well.
What's also pretty cool is how for just about all the regionals we've had in North America and Europe so far, I think almost all of the champions are heading out to London, which is really exciting to see. You got people like Ian McLaughlin, Riley Factura, and Lega, who won one of them in Europe, correct? The German regional?
I'm not totally sure.
Yeah, I know Boyd won one of the UK regionals, and he's going to be attending.
And I know Dane won Fort Wayne regionals, but I don't imagine he will be attending, so sadly missing one there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you just look at the results from some of the other regionals and just look at the accomplishments of all the people heading out to this thing. This is going to be one crazy tournament. I honestly don't know what to expect in terms of results. Who's going to be doing extremely well? Is it going to come down to, the skill of the player like it always does? Or is there going to be a bunch of surprises for us in terms of brand new players too, which I imagine Sun and Moon has brought a lot of new ones in?
I mean, I think it's going to be a little bit of both. I think the established players, the players that we all know to watch out for when we're playing, are going to bring something interesting and some sort of a, well-constructed team to this tournament. But I think if an unknown brings a team that just nobody's prepared for, or a team that's standard but they play it really, really well, they have the potential to do very well at this tournament as well. It's all kind of up in the air. It's a mini world, so to speak, so anything can happen.
Let's talk about Japan a little bit here. So we saw at Worlds in the top cut, basically every other region around the world had some type of success or player present in the top cut for a chance to win it all. We had South America in there, we had South Korea, we had Australia, and Europe and North America. And who was left out? Japan. Now, I'm thinking as a nation, they weren't very happy about that. The players themselves and just as a group, they would root for their own players in Japan. If you exclude the little fun fact about Conan, how he likes to represent both regions, I'm sure they're making whoever is attending London, they're making sure they are well prepared because I'm sure they're pretty upset about how Worlds went for them, and they want to reshape the world's thinking about them and saying that was just a fluke. We're back. We're going to have a big impact in this tournament.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think a lot of the Japanese players came to Worlds last year with very standard teams. From what I saw or heard of, a lot of them were playing, the standard Big B or Big Six, and they ran into a field of players that were overly well prepared and overly well teched out for their teams, which contributed to them not being able to find much success. So I think they're going to come back much stronger and much better prepared for this kind of up in the air metagame, where nothing is really standard yet.
And since things are so early, we always see Japan get really creative with their strategies, and I imagine that there are some things that just people have not uncovered yet that they have kind of put together and realized and are going to be able to capitalize on. And I'm really excited to see the creativity from the Japanese players.
I really like how all these separate regional metagames are going to be all coming together this early in the season, because in the past we usually see how metagames develop, kind of individually in the different regions, and then at Worlds we finally see them blend together. Now with more connectivity, and then especially this tournament, we'll see the metagame, take a huge step all in one place, and then we'll start taking steps forward from there.
Yeah, it's definitely something that's really great for those of us, I think, from a distance that are able to just watch this and enjoy it. I think it's very stressful for the players to be playing it this close. I know a lot of my European friends, I'm helping them, breed out mons or get mons that they need in their games, and they're very much stressing about just how little time they have to explore the meta and to figure out what mons they really want to bring. A lot of these guys haven't had enough time to play test any sort of team quite yet, because they're still trying to finish their in-game, considering Europeans got their game a week later. So it's going to be definitely really interesting from a distance. I don't know if I'd want to be one of the, European guys who has to play a tournament of this size right away.
Yeah, I know that I'm not even ready for the Premier Challenge this weekend. I just barely beat the game this weekend, and I'm nowhere near ready to breed or anything like that. But I'm going to be scrambling this week to get a team ready myself, and I can't imagine what they're going to be doing over there, getting the game later and competing for such a large tournament. I know that they should probably just take it with a bit of with a grain of salt. Like, you shouldn't expect to do too well at the first big tournament of the season when the metagame hasn't been developed far enough. But they should definitely be trying their hardest and looking for those cool creative strategies that are going to give them an edge over the metagame, or just learning how to play standards so well that you can't be beaten.
So here's a question for you guys. Are you more relieved that you're not going there, or would you rather be going there and be really stressed with your team building and just gathering all your resources?
I mean, I would definitely rather be going, only because I'm all the way in North America, so I know there's another continental that's going to be near me that I get to participate in. I think the most stress is on the guys who live in Europe and who potentially can either hop on the stipend train right now by doing well, or it could break their season if they don't perform at this continental. This really could be the most important tournament for guys like Jamie Boy and Alex Gomez, who may not necessarily be able to travel out of the continent to another big tournament.
Alex, what about you? Yeah, what's your choice?
I would definitely want to go if I had the opportunity, but like Diana said, it's nice. it would have been nice to, be able to participate in 2 internationals pretty easily. However, with all of the things that I'm busy with right now, I know I wouldn't have time to completely ready myself for it. But just playing in the tournament and expecting nothing, but maybe something comes out of it would be very fun. So I would definitely choose to go and just try not to stress out about it too much and just kind of play for fun.
Right, I'm in the same boat as both of you guys. While it would be nice to while it is nice to stay and relax here in North America, not having to worry about a big tournament like that, I would rather go play and be really stressed about it. That's the type of players we are. Is we're competitive. We'd want to go out there and have a chance at it.
It'd also be really cool just to be in Europe.
Yeah, visiting London would be neat. I have been to Europe before, so I've done that part at least.
I know you've traveled plenty, Steven.
Yeah. So, we talked a little about Pokemon. We talked about some of the players. And Diana, you said something that, kind of stuck out to me is Europe got their games later, but this is their international, and I'm sure they're really going to want to try hard to defend it. They don't want any invaders, which is pretty much the entire world this time, taking this tournament. So, to go along with that, who do you guys think, which region is going to win this thing? Do you think Europe is going to win this because of sheer numbers? Because basically every single major player in Europe is going to this thing. I imagine you're not going to miss this unless you have a really, really good reason to.
I mean, I think I personally have to root for Team North America. I think a North American player could very easily take this tournament. I think we have a lot of very, very strong players coming in the shape of, current world champion Wolfie Glick, Tommy Colleen's going to be there, 3-time world champion Ray Rizzo's on our side, Joshua Lorcy, Jonathan Evans, who got second at Worlds.
But who does he represent?
Well, that's the other question. Does he decide to be Team Europe or Team North America? We'll see. But the moral of the story is we're sending a lot of really strong players, and I think North America has a really good shot to actually win this tournament.
Yeah, I'd agree with Diana. I don't really mind who wins either way, because I guess I do have more American friends, but I wouldn't mind seeing a European person win. I just believe that the Americans are sending a lot of strong players there. There are a lot of names that I know that to kind of just take tournaments, like she mentioned, like Ray Rizzo and Wolf Glick, and we're even sending third at World Aaron Zhang back in 2013. And so it's really cool to see just how many strong Americans are traveling out to this. So many that did well at Worlds, who have done well at other, like the Nationals that we had. And so I think that America could definitely do well at this tournament despite Europe's sheer numbers.
Now, of course I would root for, a USA player or someone from North America to win the thing, but, I really think someone from Europe is going to take it. Not just because of sheer numbers, but because they're really good players out there. It's something that we don't get to experience a lot in terms of playing them that often, in person. That's pretty obvious because of the ocean in the between there. But I really think, and again, this is being pretty broad, but someone from Europe is going to win there. I don't know who. There are just too many to pick out. And when you look at the attendance in terms of numbers, you have, roughly 20 to 30 North American Masters heading. I imagine from South America, it's about the same number. Maybe Australia is the same thing, maybe a little lower. Japan's maybe around 10 to 15. And then Europe just has the rest of the attendance. So they've got a good shot to keep it. But again, I think the best player there is going to come out and win it. But as much as I'd like to root for Team North America, I think someone from Europe is going to win this thing.
Traitor. That's my thoughts.
It's like Benedict Arnold, except didn't he come from Europe to America and then betrayed America?
I don't know my history, Steven. I'm studying for electrical engineering right now.
Oh, okay. Well, I hope I got that right, because I'm not 100% sure.
Well, you know that the viewers are looking this up right now, or not the viewers, the listeners are looking this up right now and criticizing and judging you.
Yes, of course. How much do I know my history from childhood, grade school?
Well, you know VGC history really well, and that's what counts, right? At least for us.
Definitely.
I do like to specialize in this kind of stuff. I do a lot of behind the scenes stuff in terms of putting history together. I haven't done much recently, but once I get a little more established in the format in terms of just the Pokemon I have available to me to battle with, and stuff's kind of settled down after these first 2 months of the new format, then maybe I can start putting a little more work into that again. But is there anything else you guys would want to talk about for this international?
I don't think so. I think that's about it.
I'd like to add I'm starting a betting pool to determine which Pokemon Jamie Boyd's going to put an Eviolite on for London. So if you guys want to join in on that, you're more than welcome to.
See, now that would be a fun thing. That would be a fun thing to do.
I've got money on Mudspray.
Oh, that's a good one.
Eviolite Mudbray, that's cool. So, I guess here's one last thing we could talk about. So, we saw how the New York Premier Challenge stream over the weekend, over this past weekend, it reached about over 1,000 viewers, and this was just a small Premier Challenge on the East Coast. What do you guys think this is going to do? What kind of impact did that have, and what kind of impact do you think the stream is going to have for Sun and Moon, and especially for us trying to get more competitive players into it?
I think the impact of this new generation, all the new Pokemon, all the attention that Pokemon is getting is going to be great for VGC and for anybody making content. Outside of, you guys with the Hyper Voice, there's a ton of people that are kind of jumping on the train. I know, Colin Heyer just started a YouTube channel where he does battle videos. Lorcy has, started a YouTube channel as well as streaming. So I think VGC is going to have its biggest year yet. I think a lot of new players are going to emerge. I think a lot of new strategies are going to emerge, and it's going to be a really exciting year leading into Worlds.
Yeah, I think that if the stream shows off some cool creative strategies, or just in general some of these new Pokemon, people are definitely going to get excited about it and want to try to start competing. And I'm really excited to see VGC grow. I try my best to kind of promote it whenever I have the chance, and so because I just really want to see more people play, more people come out. Obviously, it benefits us because the larger the attendance means our game is growing, it's more stable, and we'll probably get increased prizes. But I also just want to see more people enjoy VGC because I personally love it, and I think it's a great form of competition for people who, like me, aren't so skilled reflexively.
See, with this stream stuff, I'm just thinking exposure. We're just going to get a lot of people watching this game. Hopefully people get interested, start coming out to more events. And, I'm excited to see more rookie players come into this and have some success, because we've seen every year, someone new always take the world by storm with a pretty astounding result. And it shows you can learn this game quickly, and I guess mastering it isn't as difficult as we thought it was, but, it's one of those easy to learn, difficult to master things. Do you guys agree with that?
I definitely agree with that.
I mean, the easy to learn part depends on how much you like Pokemon, because stepping from a Pokemon fan to a Pokemon competitor is fine, but if you don't know all the movesets, all the types, how the type chart works, you're going to be in for a long, long lesson.
Definitely, it's a game where if you want to learn it, if you want to compete, if you want to be a player that can do well at tournaments, it's something you can do if you put in the right amount of time.
Sounds about right, I think. And, you just got to study for these kinds of things, because Pokemon's really, really a lot about knowledge and information gathering, and then just, playing well. It's, combination of chess and poker. Really cool stuff to always see the improvements that Game Freak makes to the games. We've already talked about a bunch of those things. One last thing before we head out here. So, 2014 Worlds had a Pachirisu type Pokemon who was really seen as, throughout the season, it was pretty much garbage. And then all of a sudden, it won Worlds. what kind of Pokemon do you think could potentially show up like this, say, in London?
Well, Togedemaru's the new one, so is that what you're referring to, Steven?
Oh, we're just going based on pure relations here, right? Because they're both electric rodents.
Yeah, and Game Freak does seem to introduce a new one every year. However, I have seen Togedemaru have a bit of an impact because it does have the Lightning Rod ability and Fake Out, so it pairs kind of well next to Gyarados, helping it set up Dragon Dances. I actually saw Jake Muller, who is among those people starting YouTube channels now, so definitely go check him out. Major Bowman is his username, and he was using Togedemaru Gyarados to Fake Out, set up Dragon Dances, and go from there. While I don't see Togedemaru doing too well at the International, it's just a Pokemon that is related to Pachirisu.
Yeah, it's got that lightning rod to protect the Gyarados too. It's pretty interesting actually if you look at it, but I would put my money on Vikavolt having a really interesting tournament run on the right team. I think it's underrated, and with the amount of stuff that just can't hit Celesteela, I think people are going to be looking for those weird things that might be able to, get off that electric or fire move. I think particularly fire types are very limited, so maybe we'll see something that can be a successor to the Alolan Marowak on every single team emerge out of London, hopefully.
And what about you, Steven?
It's a good question. I didn't even actually put any thought into this. I'm trying to think of a crappy poison type that could do something, because that's the direction I'm leaning in, but I can't think of anyone at the moment.
Salazzle.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I guess I could go with that. I actually don't think it's terrible. It's pretty good offensively, but, it's too frail for my liking. I think in general, too.
And sadly, it doesn't get Fake Out before Pokebank, so Salazzle may be able to shine later in the season, post-January, but for now, it might just sit on the bench.
That's kind of rough for poor Salazzle, but I guess we'll keep talking about sleeper picks later on in the season, and there'll be a lot of cool things coming out from London. We will talk about these. We'll talk about whatever happens in London next time. We also have San Jose coming up the weekend right after London too, so we'll talk about San Jose a bit for the next show. And I think we can head out here. You guys cool with that?
Yeah.
All right, so we hope you guys enjoyed our show for this week. Doing a kind of a preview for London here. Hopefully, there's just so many players to talk about. We couldn't cover them all, but we're gonna get out of your hair. You guys can enjoy the remainder of your plane ride if you're heading to London, or just keep on training if you're listening at home. You guys can find us on iTunes. We are on there. We have an email. You can email us at vgchypervoice@gmail.com. You can send us feedback or questions about whatever you want to ask us for the show, for VGC. Send us your questions to that email. And lastly, we're all on Twitter. For Diana, what is your Twitter? Where can people follow you?
Oh, I am SheVGC on Twitter as well as Showdown, so if you see me on there, just feel free to say hi.
Okay, cool. And I think the Eshi is ESHI. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay, there you go, guys. SheVGC for Diana. Alex, where can people follow you?
At Lexicon VGC. And Steven?
I'm at Super Morioka. Thank you guys for listening to the Hyper Voice. We hope you guys enjoyed this show. Good luck to everyone going to London. We hope you have a great time there. Have a great vacation. Have a great time playing Pokemon, playing with the international players. Thank you for listening. We'll see you guys next time for more Hyper Voice.
See ya.